Boston, a city with its roots in the Revolution and its sights on the 21st century. We'll show you the city the guidebooks don't, from the secret nooks of Fenway Park to Harvard's unknown past, from a graveyard full of ghost stories to Hollywood's favorite discoveries. Step into a world where the past stands tall and the future lies hidden just below the surface. Stay tuned for the secrets of Beantown. Boston. It's a city of culture and stately sophistication where centuries-old buildings stand shoulder to shoulder with soaring skyscrapers, and where the echo of the shot heard round the world can still be heard. In most cities, when you think of history, you brace yourself for musty museums and boring bus tours. But in Boston, history isn't just old news. It's woven into the fabric of the city. Everywhere you look are vivid portraits of a young nation. For a quick and fun overview of the city's revolutionary origins, take the Freedom Trail. This 2.5-mile footpath starts at the Boston Common. Just follow the red line and be prepared for some secrets you didn't learn in school. Like this, the monument which commemorates the Battle of Bunker Hill, the first major skirmish of the Revolutionary War. Only the monument actually stands on Breed's Hill, where most of the battle was really fought. If the monument looks familiar, there's a reason.
Most people will say that, oh, that looks like the Washington Monument. Truth of the matter is the Washington Monument looks like the Bunker Hill Monument. Bunker Hill Monument was built first.
Erected in 1843, it was, at 221 feet, the tallest monument in the country, till the copycat Washington Monument went up in 1885. There's no elevator, but you can walk to the top up a 294-step spiral staircase. A popular stop on the Freedom Trail is Faneuil Hall. Tourists consider it a great place to shop and have dinner, but few know its place in history.
Faneuil Hall was built in 1742 by a merchant named Peter Faneuil. He donated the building to the city of Boston, paid for its construction, but he did so with the stipulation that it would always be used for public meetings and as a public marketplace, and it maintains that tradition today.
Everyone from George Washington to Paul Revere once roused the populace to war here. Today, the oratory has a decidedly different ring to it.
I like it here because it's kind of like a chill place. A lot of people hanging out and just, you know, enjoying the weather and the food.
The Freedom Trail will also lead you to the site of the Boston Tea Party, a rebellion still reenacted every day. In non-polluting fashion, of course. Another destination along the trail is the home of Paul Revere. Everyone knows about his famous ride, but there's more about this famous patriot that isn't generally known.
That's where Paul Revere lived from 1770 until just about 1800. He had 16 children in the course of time that he lived there, and that was the only house that British soldiers weren't ordered to stay in because there were too many kids.
Not far away, you'll find the Old North Church. Built in 1723, this was where Paul Revere turned to for information about the British invasion at Lexington and Concord that triggered the American Revolution. Why this particular church?
It had the highest steeple in colonial Boston, and that's why the two lanterns were displayed up in the top of the steeple. One if by land, two if by river. Two if by sea in the poem, but it didn't rhyme with river, so.
Nearby is a famous statue of Revere, but here's an outlandish secret few know. The statue was romanticized.
The statue directly behind us of Paul Revere, he didn't look like that, he wasn't riding a horse like that. Although Paul Revere was not a parishioner there, as a 15-year-old, he was hired to ring the bells in the steeple. As a result, he knew very well what the view was like from the top of the steeple.
Further along the Freedom Trail is the Public Garden, the oldest public botanical garden in America, established in 1837. But one of its most famous features didn't appear for 50 years.
You got to remember that the what's now Public Garden had been a swamp, a muddy swamp. Finally, in the about 1880s, someone came up with the idea of the swan boats because they thought that the swans would be much more attractive than what had been there previously.
The Public Garden is also the home of these bronze ducks. Not many people know that they commemorate a children's story written by Robert McCloskey in 1941 and were inspired by a real-life incident.
Mr. McCloskey was walking down Beacon Street. When he got to that intersection at Charles, he saw a family of ducks trying to cross Beacon Street and get into Public Garden. But they weren't able to cross the street because of the traffic until a police officer actually stopped traffic to let the ducks cross. So Mr. McCloskey, having witnessed that, went home and wrote the story, Make Way for Ducklings.
There's another place full of hidden history right next door. The Granary Cemetery, which dates back to 1660. Among those buried here is John Hancock, or at least he was. A little-known secret is that grave robbers cut off his famous signing hand the night he was buried here in 1793. And legend has it that the rest of his remains were stolen in the 1800s. There's also a famous author, although you might not recognize her name at first.
You're going to find the grave of Elizabeth Goose. She was a storyteller in the mid-1700s, and we know her better today as Mother Goose. You won't find her grave itself. You'll find Mary Goose. Apparently, Isaac had a number of children with Mary, a number with Elizabeth, and she would entertain that whole group of children, and so that's why we called her Mother Goose.
If you want to know more secrets of the Granary Cemetery, just follow the gravedigger on one of Boston's Ghosts and Gravestones tours, an intriguing but irreverent look at the city's dark side.
Come along now, hurry up, last one in gets to spend the night with a gravedigger. For God's sake, hurry up, sir. John Phillip, first mayor of the city of Boston. Now you've met the first governor and the first mayor. If politics isn't scary, I don't know what is.
The cemetery is shrouded in mystery. To begin with, the grave markers are not in their original locations.
They'd moved all these headstones around back in the 1830s. Most of our forefathers and the people that I introduced folks to here in the granary stayed planted where they were, but they shuffled all the rest of them like chessmen on a chessboard.
They moved them for aesthetic reasons and to conserve space. The cemetery was already so crowded, there was almost no room for Paul Revere when he died in 1818. This marker honors the victims of the Boston Massacre. And here's something you might not know. With only 5 casualties, it was hardly the bloodbath most people imagine.
It was Samuel Adams that came up with the name the Boston Massacre, or the Bloody Massacre, as he originally called it, which is not a term that's usually used for the death of only 5 people, as tragic as that may be. But he had a good way with the pen and a good way with people, and he managed to make that stick.
The Ghosts and Gravestones tour also takes visitors inside another Boston cemetery, Copp's Hill. This one doesn't have as many famous names, but it does have some strange stories, like the tale of Daniel Malcolm. This member of the Sons of Liberty wanted to be buried 10 feet deep, out of the reach of British soldiers. What he didn't know is the British hated this infamous pirate and smuggler as much as he hated them.
And when they heard about his request, well, they decided to mock up with him a bit, and for good luck, they would read his epitaph, spit on his grave, and then fire their muskets at his headstone for good luck. And you can still see the mark of the muskets here into the stone where they fired upon him.
This is the grave of Cotton Mather, best known as the ringleader of the Salem witch trials. His father was the president of the board at Harvard. And here's a secret, he was supposed to be a board member himself, but his notoriety kept him off. So he found a rich philanthropist and they started their own college. His backer was named Elihu Yale, and the rivalry between Harvard and Yale exists to this day. One of the most popular stops on the tour takes people back to one of Boston's darkest hours. The year was 1964, and this was where the Boston Strangler took his last victim.
As you see, a young lady by the name of Mary Sullivan, girl of only 19, a young girl like you, met a horrid end, right up there on the second floor.
Mary Sullivan was the 13th and final victim of the Strangler. A man named Albert DeSalvo later confessed to the crimes. But what you may not know is that some say the real Strangler is still out there. Attorney Dan Sharp, who represents DeSalvo's family, says the confession was a lie.
Albert had a number of good reasons to confess, the first of which was money. Albert had a wife and 2 children who he wanted to support, and he was promised book and movie rights that would provide money for him and his family. He also was told that if he confessed to the stranglings, he would be sent to a mental institution for the study of the criminal mind rather than going to prison, and he didn't want to go to prison.
DeSalvo ended up in prison anyway and died there. But DNA tests might someday prove that the most infamous case in Boston history is still unsolved.
Anything that's a mystery, like Jack the Ripper and all that, anything that's unsolved, and all the details aren't quite in place, it always gets people's brains ruminating. Maybe they can figure it out. Maybe there's some clue that was overlooked.
In the Boston Strangler case, it seems unlikely, but much about the case has always been veiled in controversy. Much of Boston is easily identifiable. We've seen images of its landmarks so often we recognize them even if we've never actually been to the city. But today, one of the largest construction projects in the history of the world is about to change the face of Boston forever. It's called the Big Dig, a $15 billion effort that will put 8 miles of downtown freeway underground, alleviating already massive congestion, and according to the builders, cutting carbon monoxide levels in Boston by 12%. The scope of the Big Dig is so massive, the only way to get an inside peek at what's going on underground is by bike tour.
In 1904, they built a subway right through here called the Blue Line subway. It's the first train in the world to go underwater through a tunnel. We're going to go underneath and along the Blue Line route over to Faneuil Hall.
The tour gives you a rare opportunity to see the secrets of a construction marvel. The plan for the Big Dig originated in 1971. Plotted out on a cocktail napkin by transportation officials and road builders, they figured it would take about 5 years. Well, they were a little off. It's been a decade and they're still not finished. Meanwhile, the Big Dig Tunnel project is more expensive in modern dollars than the Hoover Dam or the Panama Canal.
It's the biggest public works project in U.S. history. It's the most complex project probably ever undertaken in the core of a city, and we are right in the middle of it.
The Big Dig eats up $3 million a day. When completed, it will use enough concrete to build a 3-foot wide sidewalk from Boston to San Francisco and back 3 times. Now, after years of work, the end is finally in sight, and thanks to this tour, you can get an inside look at the final stages.
This right here is the southbound tunnel, about 100 feet down. It's 85 feet to be exact. So they're going to open up after the northbound lanes. The northbound lane's on the other side, but you can see all the way down to the bottom.
Everyone in Boston has certainly heard of the Big Dig. After all, the city's been torn up for what seems like an eternity. But for many residents, what exactly is going on down there remains a secret.
No one really seems to know it around here, but just underneath the cabs and the pedestrians, there's a finished highway tunnel, a $200 million chunk of the tunnel that goes from here, State Street, all the way up to the north end and over towards North Avenue.
Besides easing traffic and pollution, when the project is complete, the much-maligned elevated highway that currently bisects the city and blocks views will be history.
When this thing comes down in a few years, you're gonna be able to see right from downtown right into the north end. The north end's been blocked off for over 50 years now, and we're gonna re-knit it together.
Not only that, there will be room to plant 4,000 new trees. But until then, the action is all still underground.
We're looking at the roof of the first tunnel, and then there's gonna be another tunnel on top of that. And there are several layers of tunnel in this one spot.
Eventually, the tour brings you to the centerpiece of the project, a striking span that crosses the Charles River right into the heart of downtown.
This bridge right above us is a brand new $300 million bridge that takes people from 93 into Beacon Hill and Back Bay. This is the widest cable-stayed bridge in the world. It's the Leonard P. Zakim Bunker Hill Memorial Bridge. It's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? But it's 10 lanes wide, underneath us 4 lanes, and these 14 lanes right here make up the new crossing.
Instead of being held up by huge suspension cables like the Golden Gate Bridge, this structure relies on smaller cables for a more modern, streamlined design. The bridge marks the end of the bike tour, but it's only the beginning of the Big Dig's secrets. Because if you venture off the trail, you'll find a place that few Bostonians even know about. A storage facility in the basement of an old police station. It holds the millions of historical artifacts uncovered during excavation of the Big Dig.
Organic materials that came out were just beautifully preserved, including textiles, silk, wool, many different types of linen, flax.
These artifacts date back as far as 8,000 years, and they include some strange finds, such as a 350-year-old bowling ball.
It just appeared to be a round piece of grooved wood, and then the conservator began to soak it and clean it, and found grooved ridges in it and an actual hole in the center. And it wasn't until later that it was identified as an actual bowling ball.
Other items had more practical purposes.
It's a utilitarian redware batter bowl, lead glazed interior. It would have been used for cooking, for baking. It would have been found in every home in colonial Boston.
Like so many other places in Boston, the Big Dig is a site where the past merges seamlessly with the present. The same is true here at Fenway Park, the oldest and perhaps most revered stadium in Major League Baseball. Since it opened in 1912, millions of fans have flocked here to see everyone from Babe Ruth to Mark McGwire. But knowledgeable fans know something the general public doesn't: how to see Fenway the way the players do.
We are standing in the 5th level of Fenway Park. It's the press level, and this was all built in 1989.
Since 1993, the Red Sox have offered a behind-the-scenes tour that takes you to the most secret places in Fenway. The tour is so interesting that even Derek Jeter, a star for the hated New York Yankees, has taken it.
Even though he was the Yankees, they gave everyone an autograph.
The tour starts on the press level and then winds its way to the super exclusive 600 Club. This is not a place the average fan ever sees. To get one of these seats, you've got to be a member. And you think the price of your admission is high? Season tickets here are downright steep.
4 seats cost $30,000. And you also get a free parking space, which is priceless in Boston. Very comfortable place to watch a ball game, cushioned seats. Unlike most seats in Fenway, your feet don't stick to the floor. Air conditioning, you get the cup holders.
Here's somewhere most fans only dream about going: the Red Sox dugout, where you can walk in the footsteps of some of baseball's greats, past and present.
They said Nomar sits here, and Pedro. Ted Williams has been here. Babe Ruth came here on his first day. So a lot of people want to be sitting right where you are at this moment.
But the next stop on the tour is the highlight, the most famous landmark in baseball, the legendary left field wall. Players know it as the Green Monster because it makes fielding so hard. But what few realize is that it used to be even worse. In fact, until 1934, the wall was just a mound of dirt, forcing outfielders to run uphill to catch fly balls. Then came the monster.
It's 37 feet high, 240 feet long, and wasn't painted green until 1947. It used to be covered in advertisements for shaving and soap products.
Why'd they remove the ads? To make it easier for batters to see the ball. But little else has changed over the years, including this scoreboard.
Scoreboard's one of the few manually operated scoreboards left in the league. 2 men back there every game. They keep track of the score at Fenway and also the scores across the American League.
The tour won't take you behind the scenes of the scoreboard, but the Travel Channel's cameras got a special peek inside this off-limits area. If you look around, there's one way to know who else has been here. The 500 signatures from Hall of Famers like Carlton Fisk and others.
Well, just looking up here, we see Chuck Knobloch, who plays left field for the Yankees now. We have Steve Bedrosian, who was a Cy Young Award winner. There are a ton. They get a kick out of doing that.
The scoreboard is part of Fenway history, as are the numbers that are manually hung on it. These wooden plaques measure 16 square inches and weigh 3 pounds, and it takes a lot to wear them out.
The numbers just get painted over and over every year, and they've been around for years.
But history is only part of the aura at Fenway. There's also the field itself. Groundskeeper David Mellor is more than just a gardener. He's an artist of the green, mowing it in precise patterns that make the crowds wonder how he does it.
When it comes to mowing patterns, a lot of times people think it's done with paint or fertilizer or mowing at different heights. And actually, it's just the roller that bends in the stripe.
Part of his secret technique is mowing away from you for a light stripe and towards you for a dark one. Using those combinations, David has produced everything from diamond patterns to elaborately abstract shapes, and he says the ideas for them can come from anywhere.
Some of my elaborate and the patterns I've had the most fun with were actually ones that my daughters designed in crayons at first.
David must start his design several hours before the teams take the field. The average pattern can take up to 3 hours to complete, but all those extra hours are worth it.
All the people that come here, they see the field, they see the green, and their eyes light up. And everyone looks like they're 10 years old. And that's what baseball is about, I think, for me.
In many ways, Fenway Park is a symbol of baseball the way we like to remember it. In fact, the stadium's been used in dozens of films, including Field of Dreams and For Love of the Game. It was also featured in the TV series The Practice.
We had the pleasure of hosting a wedding between the 2 main characters of the show right here at home plate. But what's funny is after The Practice showed that wedding ceremony, our scoreboard department's been bombarded with requests to get married at home plate.
But it isn't just Fenway that's used as a set. All of Boston's played a starring role many times. Boston may not be a particularly glitzy city, but it's got character to spare. And maybe that's why it's become such a hit with Hollywood. In fact, a number of locations throughout the city have attained star status. You just need to know where to look to find them. Besides the now famous Fenway Park wedding, The Practice also relies heavily on the old Suffolk County Courthouse in Pemberton Square. Another government building that's received some serious screen time is the Massachusetts State House. It's been seen in movies from The Verdict to Amistad. Just a few steps down Beacon Street is another famous facade, the building that houses the law firm on Ally McBeal. And here's something that will surprise fans of the show. It's really the home of a Protestant religious organization. And if this former Beacon Hill firehouse looks familiar, it should. It was once the home of MTV's The Real World. But Boston is most famous, at least in Hollywood, for its bars. This is Woody's L Street Tavern in South Boston. It was just another local watering hole until it became Matt Damon's favorite haunt in Good Will Hunting. And this legendary locale is the bar where everybody knows your name. You can't miss the famous Cheers exterior. No one expects to see Sam, Carla, or Cliff at the Bull and Finch pub. But first-time visitors are often shocked by what they do find inside.
They see the door, they've seen the door on TV. Then they turn around and they look at the bar, and it's a wall bar, not the island bar. Oh, this doesn't look like the TV set.
A production crew created their own version of the interior back in Hollywood, but the exteriors are from right here in Boston. But here's something you might not know. The Bull and Finch almost didn't make it. The producers had already rejected dozens of places when they just happened to see this one in the Boston phone book.
They wrote it down. That was the first place they visited on their next round. Loved it. Came in, they looked around, they said, this is it. Went to the payphone, called their mates and said, Eureka, we have found it.
Since the show's debut in 1982, more than 750,000 people a year have shown up. In fact, the bar is one of the city's most popular attractions.
People in the tourism industry keep track of questions that people ask. The two most asked questions, where are the restrooms and where's Cheers? And so, yeah, we do a lot of business.
The Bull and Finch feels like it's been here forever. But what even most Bostonians don't know is that this was originally a turn-of-the-century mansion. The pub moved in 1969 when it was literally imported from England.
The front room was built in Coventry, England. Bit by bit, piece by piece, it was assembled, then disassembled and brought over here in a lorry and put together. And voila, we had an English pub here on Beacon Hill.
But the real draw isn't the English atmosphere, it's the television show. And over the years, various Cheers cast members made guest appearances at their illusionary TV home.
Whenever we had some occasion to need somebody from the cast, we'd call and they'd say, well, Coach will come because he's from Providence. And so did Cliff or John Ratzenberger, because he was from Connecticut. Woody came when he first came on the show.
The only TV stars around here now are on the walls, but the bar does have one local legend, Eddie Doyle, who's been a bartender at the Bull and Finch for more than a quarter of a century.
I'm probably as close as Ted Danson that you'll get.
Eddie has watched this place transform from neighborhood pub to global tourist mecca. And he says that while everybody may not know your name, you'll fit right in.
People feel like they've been here before, you know, because they've seen it on TV and they feel like they've already been here before. So they're very comfortable coming in here.
There's another local bar that's made a name for itself on the small screen. And while it may not be as famous as the Bull and Finch, Doyles has established itself as one of the supporting stars of Boston Public. Doyles was around long before the TV show. In fact, this place was here just after electricity. It opened in the 1880s in what was then Boston's Brewery District. It's always been a popular pit stop for local politicians, but now it's become a growing tourist attraction. And there's one spot that everyone wants to see.
Most of the scenes in Boston Public take place in a particular booth, the one over there. And everybody that comes in asking about it, they all want to sit in that booth.
The bar first got its big break thanks to the show's set designer, a Doyles regular.
He's been coming here for years. He's a local kid. So when Boston Public decided to come to Boston and they needed a bar room, they put him in charge, and he thought this place was just a natural.
With the location locked in, the show's crew went to work.
It took hours and hours of film, but it was all outside. They showed people walking in summer clothes, winter clothes. Then they came inside with a still camera, took a bunch of shots, and then they built a set out in LA.
They even painstakingly recreated these murals. And here's a secret about the one that hangs over the bar, which has been there for more than 30 years.
It's painted over a big mirror because Billy Doyle, who owned the place for hundreds of years, he got sick cleaning the mirror every day, so he painted the murals on himself.
But even though Doyles has gone Hollywood, it's still just a neighborhood joint at heart.
You see blue-collar workers and businessmen and politicians, and they're all just, you know, regular guys talking about what's going on in the city.
Doyle's just a nice laid-back bar. Good food, good beer, good people. You know, you can relax in here. Just a nice place.
That kind of laid-back attitude is something Boston is famous for. But that doesn't mean people here aren't ambitious. They just know how to pace themselves. Boston, a city that wears many masks. It's a bustling urban haven, a living history lesson, and America's leading college town. There are more than 60 colleges in the greater Boston area, including the nation's oldest university, Harvard. Its ivy-covered campus is located in Cambridge, just minutes outside Boston. And if you want to know some of its best-kept secrets, you've got to go right to the source, the students. Harvard offers 2 tours a day for visitors and prospective students. And tour guide Sarah Cohen says there are some questions everybody asks right off the bat.
They want to know, like, how we got into Harvard, like, what we think of it here, what life is like here, how much we study. You know, like SAT scores. What was your SAT score?
But once the tour gets underway, you'll learn some fascinating and often quirky things you didn't know about Harvard. Like the story behind this statue. Known around campus as the Statue of 3 Lies, it memorializes John Harvard, widely believed to be the school's founder. He was really just an early benefactor with deep pockets.
He donated a lot of money and land to the university in 1638, and they were so pleased with his donation that they decided to name the university after him. So John Harvard wasn't really the founder, that's the first lie, and the second lie is that the university was really founded in 1636, not 1638.
The third lie involves the appearance of the statue itself, which doesn't really resemble John Harvard.
At the time of construction, all of the portraits and descriptions of John Harvard had been destroyed in the fire of 1764. According to legend, a student was selected at random, dressed in colonial garb, and posed and modeled as John Harvard.
One of the best-kept secrets is where all the dents in the brick sidewalks came from.
Before they had heating, students would put cannonballs in the fireplace and warm them up, and then use those heated cannonballs to heat their rooms. And springtime would come around, though, and the students wouldn't need any heat anymore, so they would dispose of the cannonballs in the best way they knew, which was kind of to just dump them out the window. And as a result, there are a lot of potholes in front of the buildings.
Then there's this glass breezeway connecting the Widener Library with a building next door. What could be interesting about that? Well, you see, when Eleanor Widener bequeathed the library in 1914, she stipulated that no piece of brick or stone could ever be removed from it. But that meant they couldn't build a new hallway without violating her wishes. So how'd they get around it?
The student was reading through the stipulation and realized that it didn't say anything about glass. So what they ended up doing was breaking through one of the top windows, and they built a breezeway directly out of the building without touching any of the bricks.
There's one place on campus that's not on the student tour that remains a secret even to most students: the Harvard Museum of Natural History. Hidden inside are some valuable treasures, including this amazing glass floral collection.
The glass flowers were commissioned by George Lincoln Goodell, who was the first director of the Botanical Museum, and he wanted something that would show the beauty of plants.
This one-of-a-kind collection has attracted aficionados from all over the world. The flowers were made by a father and son team, the Blaschkas, who produced these delicate pieces for 50 years. They turned out more than 4,000 flowers representing 170 plant families.
you can imagine something as thin as a sheet of paper made out of glass. I mean, they are just that delicate.
To create these delicate pieces, the Blaschkas relied on the basic tools and techniques they had perfected in jewelry making.
The models actually have a wire understructure that gives them much more strength and flexibility than they would if they just were made out of glass.
But the Harvard Museum of Natural History is only one of dozens of museums in the Boston area. And if the idea of wandering through stuffy old collections makes you yawn, don't worry. We've got a surprise for you. Boston's Museum of Fine Arts. Around here, people don't just show up to check out the art, they check out each other. In fact, on Friday nights, this is one of the hottest spots in town to nab a date.
This is Friday at the Museum of Fine Arts, and as you can see, we have quite a wild party here every Friday. It's a way of really getting young people in from the office to enjoy art and to meet one another in, I think, really beautiful surroundings.
It's a nice event where you can come and see old friends and make new friends.
You would get people from 20s up to 60s here, and anybody can feel comfortable.
The program began in 1997, and though it got off to a slow start, it now attracts as many as 1,000 people. The whole thing was actually a secret plan to draw people who wouldn't normally spend their night at a museum.
The number of people that were...
So where do you teach?
Oh, I didn't know you taught. Yeah. I think a museum is for everyone, and I think the first time someone comes through the door, perhaps they come to meet someone else, but they're going to feel easier about coming next time. They're going to connect with the art more, which is really what I want.
But the Friday night events have produced more than just a newfound appreciation for art.
And we've got couples who've written to us who've been married having met here, and no doubt some babies have been conceived as a result as well.
I tell everybody to come. If you're going to mate in Boston, this is where you have to go.
If you want to know the real Boston, not just the tourist version, you got to go into its neighborhoods. That's where you'll find the true flavor of the city, as well as those secret spots only the locals know. A good place to start is the wharf area, the fish pier in particular. While this oceanside stretch is full of fishing boats and processing plants, it's also the unlikely home of some of the city's top restaurants. The secret is that fancy doesn't necessarily mean quality, because what natives call one of Boston's best dining spots has no sign, no frills, and no name. In fact, regulars call it the no-name restaurant.
We try to take care of the people, so over the years, we never put a sign up, we never gave it a name. So over the years, the customers gave us the name, no name. And my uncle says, if it works, don't fix it.
It's worked well enough to make this a Boston institution. But if you want to check out the no name for yourself, you'd better ask for directions, because you won't find this place on the average tourist map.
We have pointed in several different directions.
One of these deals?
No, you've gone far too far. No, it's
mile and a quarter that way, over the water. Oh.
For the record, the No Name's official address is 15 Fish Pier off Northern Avenue. It's been there since 1917, when it was just a diner for fishermen. About 50 years ago, it was open to the public, and it's been a popular stop ever since.
A lot of times people come in and they see how casual it looks. You see paper cups or something. You think it's going to maybe not be that good, and then the food is absolutely fantastic.
We have people who come here, their grandfather started bringing the father, and now the father's bringing the son. That's how long we have clientele coming here.
One big reason for its popularity is the freshness of the fish.
We're right on the Boston Fish Pier. We need fish, we go out there and get it.
The menu has hardly changed in half a century. And if you want to know the secret to their clam chowder, well, the recipe is posted right there on the wall.
Well worth the search.
But if seafood's not your thing, head for the North End, Boston's oldest neighborhood.
original settlers, English. They either came here for religious reasons or they came here because they expected they could make a good living with fishing and shipping and whatnot.
That was back in the 1630s, but the North End received a huge population boost about 200 years later as successive waves of Irish, Jewish, and finally Italian immigrants descended on the area.
At the end of the 19th century, population density of this little third of a square mile comparable to Calcutta, India. It was an unbelievably difficult place.
The secret to the area's popularity among new arrivals was simple. Location, location, location.
If you were getting off a boat here in Boston, you got off the boat 2 blocks from here, walked across the street, and you were in the North End. That was it.
These days, the North End is Boston's Little Italy. In fact, this is the place that introduced pizza to America in the early 1900s. It's about as close to an old world neighborhood as you'll find. And the secret to exploring the North End is to venture off the beaten path.
The key to the North End is the side streets. Salem Street behind me is a marvelous little street, tiny little passageways, little courtyards. It's all still there. You just have to take the time to find it.
It's a very warm, open, friendly neighborhood. Everybody knows everybody else. And since it's so intimate, you can't live in this neighborhood and be a type A personality. No way. I mean, you've got to stop and chit-chat with everybody or they're offended.
People will stop you on the street, they'll ask questions, they'll give you a little argy-bargy. It's a lot of fun. They're very, very friendly. And it has a genuineness to it that I think it's very difficult to find in many of our big cities today.
Buongiorno, come va?
The neighborhood is a great place to shop for all things Italian, especially ethnic delicacies.
Okay, I'll have a quarter pound of that.
But be forewarned, the one thing you need to know about the North End shops, don't expect to get through them in a hurry.
Really good.
I like it. It's very nice.
It's very laid back. I mean, it's very Italian. It takes time to get things done. Even if you go to the butcher, you sit in the chair and wait 30, 45 minutes while they cut the meat for you, trim it the way you want it, and chit-chat.
The sounds, the smells, and the slowed-down atmosphere are all part of the lifestyle, and that's what makes the North End so unique.
It's the entire experience, not just dining, but the whole experience of being Italian for a day or just a few hours.
Now, the last place we're going to tell you about probably doesn't qualify as a neighborhood. In fact, only 2 people live there at any one time. But if you want to get a feel for New England's nautical history, just hop a boat to relatively unknown Little Brewster Island. It's 8 miles off the coast of the city, and it's home to the last Coast Guard manned lighthouse in the U.S. The officers assigned here are on the job around the clock, making sure that this still active lighthouse remains in prime condition.
What we do is we come up with a schedule of 2 weeks on the island, 1 week off, and there's always 2 people on the island, a minimum of 2 people, and we just rotate that way.
The lighthouse was originally built in 1716 to guide ships into Boston Harbor.
And imagine back in the 1800s, any ship that drew a lot of water, the only safe entrance to the harbor was right here. So what would happen is that if it was foggy or what have you, they might bump into the rocks.
The lighthouse has gone through a number of changes. In fact, the original one was destroyed by British soldiers in 1776.
The British said, hey, if we can't have that tower, the colonists aren't going to have it either, so they blew it up. And then what happened is when the war was over, it took time to get the money to rebuild this.
A new 65-foot lighthouse was put up in 1783. 75 years later, in 1859, they had to add 14 more feet to the tower to make room for what's known as the Fresnel lens. This delicately designed antique lens is worth $2 million and it's irreplaceable. It weighs 4,000 pounds and is made of over 300 pieces of individual glass. Over 100 years after it was installed, that lens is still in perfect working condition and continues to amaze visitors.
Most people are really, really impressed with the Fresnel lens. You go up there, it's just so awesome. There's this 11-foot crystal, and it's like the most gorgeous Christmas tree in the world.
The crystal sends out a beam of light 24 hours a day that's visible for 16 miles. To keep it in top working condition, the crew constantly monitors the lens, as well as the machinery that moves it.
Okay, we're in the gear room. We have the chariot wheels here, and there's 12 of them, and all 4,000 pounds of this lens sits right on these chariot wheels. We have to oil these every week, keep them lubed up.
Besides the ancient rotating light, they also use some modern technology to assist ships, such as this fog signal.
The way that it turns on the fog signal is by measuring out here where there's like a wall of fog. And that will generate from a computer chip, hey, there's limited visibility out there, and it will set the fog signal up.
Little Brewster Island was closed to the public for almost 300 years, but now anyone can visit by making reservations. The boat ride over from Long Wharf in Boston is fun. And once you're here, the Lighthouse is an exquisite example of old-style craftsmanship.
We're big fans of lighthouses, and so we thought we'd take the boat out and come see the beautiful light. Have you guys liked it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun place to run around.
In fact, the same can be said for all of Boston. It's a fun place to run around with just the right mixture of culture, history, adventure, and excitement. The real secret is that it's a one-of-a-kind city. You'll never feel bored here or have that sinking sensation you've already seen the same thing somewhere else. This is a totally unique place, a marvelous metropolis whose citizens proudly look back without ever losing sight of what lies ahead.